I think it's hard when we see someone like Yvette and Consolé sitting up at this table here, to see this kind of power and to see this kind of strength and resilience, to also remember the many of those rescapés who are back living in their villages, next to the killers of their own family, and to remember what they're actually living on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, I'm not Rwandan yet, but having worked in Rwanda over the last decade, it's strange how time flies, because it was just a little over a decade that I was sitting here in these chairs at the university, and I had no idea that graduating and then deciding to go off to Rwanda to work on a short film would result in the next decade of my life being absorbed in this history. So I should say that everything I learned really came first from these chairs and some of the individuals in this room who shared with me, particularly even at the Fortunoff Video Archives for Holocaust Testimonies here at Yale, the power and the importance of testimony, and what we can learn from testimony, and the imperative to record and preserve testimony. And so I stand here really as a conduit of those testimonies. And so I want to keep my words short, and before I continue on, actually share a segment from these testimonies of somebody who is back in the countryside in Rwanda, and share with you some of her thoughts and words on what the legacy of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda actually is in her own life. I'll start with Ansila. And if I may ask, is it possible to turn the lights out? Is there? Thank you. I'll try that again. Here we go. can turn the lights back on. I show this. I wanted to begin by showing this particular clip from Monsila's testimony because I think that even as she recounts her memories and her failing memory, it's an ironic moment in her life where her memory is actually failing, but she still feels the imperative that she must continue to remember even the names of her child, and she knows she's forgetting their names. And so she lives with this piece of paper in her purse, and she folds it up every day and looks at it in order to try to remember the names. And the loss of her memory isn't just due to age. She's not very, very old. She's still in her 50s. And I share that because I think that we often forget that the genocide continues for the rescapés, that it's not something that ended in 1994 after 3 months, that it continues every single day. And in fact, as many academics often write, genocides have many different stages, and the final stage is the denial, the elimination of the evidence, is the elimination of the trace, the bones, the history. And so in the first panel, we talked a lot about prevention of genocides and stopping genocides and atrocities around the world. And I think that we often forget that the very act of recording testimony or establishing the truth, establishing the history that happened, is an attempt to halt the perpetual genocide from continuing. And it is a constant act that we must continue to engage in. And even this very commemoration, this very memorialization today is an act to attempt to stop all of the denialists and to stop the revision of the genocide that is still taking place until it ends with the elimination of the trace. I'll leave you with one story also of one of the legacies of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda that I'm very, very disturbed by when I'm back in Rwanda. I just returned 2 weeks ago, and I'm astounded, yes, by much of the amazing progress of the country and much of the focus on building of roads and infrastructure and certainly new traffic lights and street signs, which has been one of the focuses of the country. It's actually quite exciting and interesting to see that particular focus among many others. But the very unsettling sort of reality of sitting down with others like me who have come from the outside to work in Rwanda as a result, or as on account of, or because of this history, and then to share with me the work that they're currently doing in Rwanda. And one of the organizations that I met, somebody working at the organizations, gives microloans. And we think this is amazing. We have people like us here in the United States sending small loans to Rwanda by way of PayPal to help somebody buy a cow and maybe start a business and maybe have some more income in their home so that they can pull themselves out of poverty, particularly if, they're suffering medical problems and need extra money to go to the hospital. And so one of these microloan organizations, I asked them, I said, do you have a specific profile for the rescapés? And they said, well, no, we don't. We don't discriminate. And I was puzzled. Okay, here we are working in Rwanda because of this genocide. And the very individuals who suffered the most are not being served necessarily. So I said, okay, well, what does that mean? She said, well, actually, we even have profiles for perpetrators. I said, really? Could you tell me a little bit more about it? She said, well, under our model, the way that we grant loans, we have to ensure that the loans are paid back to the people who grant the loans. So people in the United States who send $20, we want to make sure that they get their $20 back so they reinvest it again. And actually, a way that we ensure that those loans are going to be paid back is we make sure that there are people in the circle around them who can ensure that they will contribute. And she said, and perpetrators have relatives and larger families around them. And I was struck that here are perpetrators being rewarded by the international community by NGOs and organizations that are striving to help rebuild a country. And we look back to what Yvette just spoke about, Operation Turquoise and the zone that was opened up, and then the international community that rushed to the aid of so many of whom were perpetrators, genocidaires, carrying weapons in the so-called refugee camps that were set up in the Congo. And remember our relationship to these places and how we impact them. So I leave you with that at this moment, and then I think we can continue later on.